There are places in our world that whisper of secrets long forgotten. Civilizations that rose with brilliance, only to vanish without a trace. Stories of cities swallowed by the sea, of knowledge and power lost beneath the waves. Among them all, one name stirs the imagination more than any other: Atlantis. Was it just a tale spun by Plato to teach a lesson? Or was it a memory of something real? An advanced civilization that once thrived and then disappeared in a single, dreadful night. For centuries, archaeologists, historians, and dreamers have searched for answers. Where was Atlantis? Who built it? And perhaps most haunting of all, could parts of it still lie hidden beneath the ocean, waiting to be discovered? Tonight, we journey into the truth and the myth, the history and the mystery of Atlantis. Before you settle in, take a moment to make yourself comfortable. And if you enjoy these late-night wanderings through history, consider subscribing. Maybe leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, let the day fade away, and together let's dive beneath the waves. Tonight, as you rest your head and let the day drift quietly behind you, we set sail into a mystery that has captivated human imagination for thousands of years. Across cultures and centuries, people have whispered about lands that once thrived and then disappeared, leaving behind nothing but questions. Stories of golden cities swallowed by the jungle, temples hidden under shifting sands, and entire civilizations that seem to vanish as though erased by time itself. There is something deeply magnetic about these tales. They touch on a yearning we all share, the sense that our world is full of forgotten chapters, hidden just beyond the edges of what we know. They remind us that history is not a fixed story carved in stone, but a living puzzle filled with pieces still missing. And among all these whispers, one name rises above the rest: Atlantis. Atlantis is more than a myth, more than a half-remembered story passed down from distant ancestors. It is humanity's most enduring enigma, a tale that has echoed through countless generations. For some, it is a fable of hubris, a warning about the dangers of pride and power. For others, it is a lost memory of a once great civilization, swallowed by the sea but not by time. And for dreamers, Atlantis is a promise that out there, hidden beneath the waves, waits proof of wonders we can scarcely imagine. It is a story that lives in that twilight space between fact and legend, a place where philosophy and history, imagination and memory all weave together. Even now, the mere mention of the name conjures visions of shining palaces, canals carved with impossible precision, metals that glowed with inner light, and a people said to descend from gods themselves. But what draws us most is not just the splendor, it is the mystery of its end. For Atlantis, so the story goes, was not gently faded or slowly forgotten. It was destroyed in a single night and day, a sudden and catastrophic collapse that sent the island nation tumbling into the ocean's depths. A great civilization, here one moment and gone the next, leaving only silence where once there had been music, voices, and life. It is this mixture of greatness and tragedy that has kept Atlantis alive in our imagination. If it were simply a myth of perfection, it might not have endured. If it were merely a cautionary tale of destruction, it might have faded. But together, the rise and fall form a story that feels both timeless and strangely human. A reminder that even the most powerful can be humbled, and that beneath the surface of the world, the unknown still waits. Imagine the sea, stretching endlessly in all directions, the sound of waves rolling softly against the shore. The night sky above, dotted with stars as countless as the stories we have told. Somewhere beyond that horizon, lies Atlantis. Not in a place we can point to on a map, but in the collective imagination of humankind. To understand it, we must go back. Far back, further than most histories can reach, to a time when philosophers and storytellers shaped the way we still see the world. The story of Atlantis does not begin in an explorer's journal, nor in the ruins of an ancient temple. It begins with one man seated in the shaded courtyards of ancient Greece. His name was Plato. Plato was no ordinary thinker. He was one of the greatest philosophers the world has ever known, a man whose words shaped the foundations of Western thought. He wrote of politics, of morality, of the nature of reality itself. His writings have been studied for over 2 millennia, and among them, nestled within 2 dialogues, are the only accounts we have of Atlantis. Think of it. The legend that has sparked so much fascination for so many centuries rests on just a handful of pages, written around 360 BCE. No earlier record has been found, no inscription on an ancient stone, no fragment of another text, only Plato's words preserved through time, whispering of a civilization lost. Was he recounting history or crafting allegory? That question has never been answered and perhaps never can be. But in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he spoke of Atlantis not as a mere invention, but as something passed down. He claimed the story was told to his ancestor Solon, one of the great lawgivers of Athens, by Egyptian priests during his travels. They spoke of an island empire greater than any known, lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato described its marvels with care, its structure, its people, its wealth. He painted Atlantis as both wondrous and flawed, noble yet vulnerable. And then he spoke of its fall, swallowed by the sea in a single dreadful night. It is here that the story begins, not in certainty, but in shadow. A philosopher's words, a memory passed through generations, a glimpse of something that might have been. As you listen tonight, let the details drift gently around you. Not as hard facts carved in stone, but as the kind of story told around a fire long after the sun has set. The kind of story that settles into the mind, not as proof, but as possibility. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and picture yourself in that ancient courtyard. The air is warm, cicadas hum in the background, and before you sits Plato himself, his voice steady, his words deliberate. He begins not with the certainty of history, but with the wonder of memory. He speaks, and for the first time in recorded history, Atlantis comes alive, and so with the hush of night around us, we too begin the journey. From the timeless allure of lost civilizations to the story that has haunted humanity for over 2,000 years, Atlantis awaits, shining, mysterious, and forever just beyond reach. Imagine yourself drifting back more than 2,000 years to a time when the world was slower, quieter, and guided by the rhythm of seasons rather than the ticking of clocks. The heart of Greece is alive with voices, with markets, with debates, with young students gathered in courtyards listening to men whose words would echo across millennia. Among them sits Plato. Plato is not a man of idle chatter. He is a thinker, a teacher, a writer whose ideas have already begun to shape how people see themselves and the world around them. He walks the streets of Athens, but his mind reaches far beyond, into questions of justice, the soul, the nature of reality itself. He builds not temples of stone, but temples of thought, dialogues that will outlast empires. It is in 2 of these dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, that he introduces something unusual, something unlike his usual meditations on morality or the structure of the state. He introduces a story, In Timaeus, Atlantis arrives almost as an aside, like a curtain gently pulled back before the main performance begins. The dialogue itself is concerned with the nature of the universe, the birth of the cosmos, the ideal forms of society. Yet before those vast subjects unfold, Plato places a fragment of history on the table, or at least what he claims is history. He tells us that the tale was passed down to him, not invented. It begins with Solon, a lawmaker of Athens who lived generations before Plato. Solon, so the story goes, travelled to Egypt, land of vast temples and priests who claimed knowledge stretching back thousands upon thousands of years. There, in conversations with these guardians of memory, Solon was told of a place that once existed far beyond the known world, a mighty island larger than Libya and Asia combined, that had flourished 9,000 years before Solon's own time. That island was called Atlantis. Now consider for a moment how far this story has travelled. Egyptian priests spoke it to Solon. Solon, in turn, carried it back to Greece. It passed through generations, arriving eventually in the words of Plato. From there, it would ripple outward, carried across time to us, here, tonight. Like a long game of cosmic telephone, each voice shaping it just a little, but the essence surviving. A whisper that refuses to fade. Plato does not treat Atlantis as a casual fable. He writes with the tone of someone preserving a memory, a record too important to let slip away. He describes not only its location, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we call the Strait of Gibraltar, but its people, its wealth, its structure, its very lineage. According to the priests, and retold by Plato, Atlantis was born from the union of a god and a mortal woman. Poseidon, lord of the seas, fell in love with a mortal named Clito. To protect her, he built a dwelling upon a hill encircled by rings of land and water, a fortress and a sanctuary. From their union came 10 sons, the first kings of Atlantis, who divided the land into 10 regions and ruled in harmony. The eldest, Atlas, gave his name to both the island and the surrounding ocean. It is from this divine origin that the Atlanteans drew their strength. They were said to be wiser, nobler, closer to the gods than ordinary mortals. Their society reflected this elevated nature. Plato tells us that they built a capital unlike anything the world had ever seen, a city of concentric circles, alternating bands of land and sea, connected by bridges and canals. From the air, had one been able to fly, it would have looked like a great target etched into the earth, a design at once practical and symbolic. Within those rings lay marvels. Palaces glimmered, temples rose in splendor, docks teemed with ships. At the very heart stood a grand temple to Poseidon, its walls gleaming with precious metals, its interior adorned with gold and ivory. It was said to house a statue of Poseidon himself, driving 6 winged horses, a monument of such scale and craftsmanship that it seemed to belong more to dreams than to human hands. The Atlanteans possessed resources beyond imagining. Their land yielded every kind of wealth, fertile soil, forests, metals, both common and rare. Among these treasures was one that Plato names with particular care, orichalcum. A mysterious reddish metal, second only to gold in value, it was said to shine with a fiery glow. The walls of their temples were sheathed in it, reflecting light as though lit from within. To the ancients, orichalcum was already ancient, a word that suggested something precious and half forgotten. Even today, its true nature remains uncertain. Was it copper, brass, some lost alloy? Or was it something entirely unknown to us, a fragment of technology from a civilization now gone? And so the capital city shimmered. Bridges arched gracefully over the canals guarded by towers. Ships slid through the waters carrying goods and people across the rings. Gardens bloomed, fountains sparkled, music echoed in the courtyards. It was a world of abundance, of order, of beauty made tangible. Yet beyond the city, the empire stretched even further. Atlantis, Plato tells us, was not confined to a single island. Its dominion extended across islands and onto the continents of Europe and Africa. It was a maritime power, unrivaled, a superpower before such a word existed. Its fleets commanded the seas, its influence touched distant shores. At first, the Atlanteans ruled wisely. Their kings, descended from Poseidon, upheld laws inscribed on a column of orichalcum in the heart of the temple. They valued justice, balance, and harmony. Their prosperity was matched by their virtue. They were, in many ways, Plato's vision of an ideal society, ordered, prosperous, and aligned with the divine. But even as you listen to this description, there is an undercurrent, a quiet shadow. For no tale of greatness is told without the echo of what is to come. Plato's introduction of Atlantis in Timaeus is just that, an introduction. He sets the stage, paints the picture, and then leaves us leaning forward, waiting for more. The true unfolding of the story comes in his next dialogue, Critias, where Atlantis is described in greater detail and where the seeds of its downfall are sown. But for now, let us linger in this first vision. Picture the gleaming city with its concentric rings. Hear the water lapping gently against the quays, the hum of voices in the marketplaces, the faint ring of hammers on metal. See the glow of orichalcum in the setting sun, casting fiery reflections across marble and stone. Imagine a society at its peak, unaware that its name will one day become a synonym for mystery itself. It is here, in Plato's careful words, that Atlantis takes its first breath. A story carried from Egypt to Solon, from Solon to Plato, from Plato to us. A thread woven into history, fragile yet unbroken. And as the night deepens around you, you may feel that same thread stretching across time, connecting you to those who first heard the tale more than 2,000 years ago. They too must have wondered, was it real? Was it allegory? Was Plato teaching a lesson or preserving a memory? We do not know, but in that uncertainty lies the beauty. Atlantis may be lost, but its story endures, pulling us gently into its depths, as though inviting us to follow where the waves have gone. And so, with Plato's first whisper still echoing, we turn the page to the next part of the tale, the unfolding of Atlantis in all its splendor, and the slow, inevitable shadow that would one day consume it. Now that we have lingered in the brilliance of Atlantis' beginning, let us turn to the part of the story that has always drawn the deepest fascination, its fall. In Plato's Critias, the tale continues from the splendor of the capital city and the virtuous reign of its early kings, guiding us gently into a world that grows more complicated, more human, and ultimately more tragic. Critias was never completed. The final pages, the conclusion of Atlantis' story, are lost to history. We are left with fragments, glimpses of a civilization in decline, hints of a catastrophe that was to come, and a story frozen mid-gesture, like a wave caught in time before it crashes. Perhaps it is fitting that such a story ends unfinished. For the mystery of Atlantis itself is unfinished, its truth swallowed perhaps by the same waters that would one day claim its cities. In Critias, Plato begins to reveal the changes that slowly crept over Atlantis. At first, the Atlanteans were noble and virtuous, heirs to a divine heritage through Poseidon, and guided by laws meant to keep balance and harmony. They were wise and fair, their actions aligned with justice. But as generations passed, cracks began to appear in this shining veneer. The initial perfection, it seems, could not withstand the pressures of time and human nature. It is easy to imagine this process in a quiet, intimate way. Picture the early kings walking through the streets of the concentric city, overseeing the canals, the markets, the temples. Their eyes see abundance, and yet, in the shadows, desire begins to stir. At first it is small, a craving for more gold, a yearning to extend influence beyond the boundaries of their own island, a subtle envy of their neighbors. These whispers of ambition are hardly noticeable at first, like the gentle hiss of wind before a storm. But as the Atlanteans intermarried with mortals, rather than remaining solely the children of gods, their divine nature began to dilute. Plato's words suggest a gradual corruption, a shift from harmony to hubris, the very qualities that had made Atlantis great. Its power, its resources, its ingenuity became instruments of greed. The people who once upheld justice for the sake of virtue began to wield it for conquest. Their fleets, once used to explore and trade, now patrolled with authority, demanding obedience from distant lands. The same canals that carried goods now carried armies. And so, the fall begins quietly, imperceptibly. It is not sudden at first, but inevitable. Plato's description is careful, almost measured, showing that even the greatest civilization can falter from within. Pride seeps into their laws, desire seeps into their hearts, and the Atlanteans begin to forget the very principles that had set them apart from ordinary mortals. The golden temples still gleam, the orichalcum still shines, yet behind that splendor, a shadow gathers. Plato seems to take pleasure in painting both the magnificence and the corruption. He does not rush to judgment, but allows us to watch the transformation unfold. We see the Atlanteans at the height of their power, yet vulnerable to the flaws inherent in human and even semi-divine nature. The warning is subtle but clear. Unchecked ambition, hubris, and greed can undermine even the most extraordinary of societies. And then comes the cataclysm. The story reaches its final, unforgettable image. Atlantis, swallowed by the sea in a single night and day. Plato describes it as though the ocean itself rises in righteous fury, sweeping away the proud city and all its accomplishments. Bridges collapse, canals fill with water, temples vanish beneath the waves, ships and palaces alike are claimed, and the land itself is lost to history. There is no slow erosion, no gradual decay, just the sudden, irrevocable destruction that has captured the imagination of dreamers for centuries. Try to picture it. Imagine the concentric circles of land and water, once a marvel of engineering, now broken and submerged. The glow of orichalcum disappears, swallowed by the dark, cold depths. The music of fountains and the laughter of citizens fade into silence. For a single night and day, the island, the people, the wealth, the knowledge, everything that had made Atlantis extraordinary vanishes beneath the waves. And in that disappearance, the story leaves us with both awe and unease. It is this image, more than any other, that has given Atlantis its timeless power. There is a melancholy beauty to a civilization so magnificent that even its fall becomes legendary. But there is also a question that Plato leaves deliberately unanswered. Was this fall literal, historical, or allegorical? Did Atlantis truly exist, or was Plato using its story to illustrate a lesson about human nature, pride, and the fleeting nature of power? The debate continues to this day. Some scholars argue that Plato invented Atlantis entirely as a cautionary tale, a moral fable designed to explore the consequences of hubris on a grand scale. Others believe he may have based the story on older accounts, fragments of memory preserved by Solon and the Egyptian priests, perhaps recounting a real culture lost to time. Yet even within these arguments, certainty eludes us. The story hovers in the space between history and philosophy, between fact and imagination, leaving room for wonder. The city that sank beneath the waves continues to shine, not in physical form, but in the collective consciousness of humanity. Its story echoes in every tale of lost glory, every sunken city discovered by explorers, every whisper of a civilization erased by time. Perhaps that is the true marvel of Atlantis, that it lives not in ruins, but in thought, not in stones or metals, but in the dreams of those who hear its story and allow it to unfold in their minds. The collapse, catastrophic though it may have been, did not destroy the essence of what Atlantis represents: the beauty of ambition, the fragility of greatness, the delicate balance between pride and humility. So as you imagine the great flood sweeping across the city tonight, let it not only be a vision of loss, but also a gentle reminder of impermanence. The Atlanteans, like us, faced forces larger than themselves. Their story is at once a warning and a wonder. And in that space between what was and what remains, there is a quiet, reflective peace. A place where history, myth, and imagination meet. As the waves of Atlantis' story ripple through time, carrying the memory of its rise and sudden fall, they encounter the minds of those who first tried to understand it. In ancient Greece, long after Plato's voice had shared the tale in shaded courtyards and quiet gardens, other thinkers raised their eyebrows and pondered its meaning. Some believed, others doubted, and yet all contributed to the echo that would keep Atlantis alive, even as it began to fade into the shadowed corners of history. Among the first to voice skepticism was Aristotle, Plato's own pupil. A man of meticulous thought and careful reasoning, Aristotle listened to the stories that swirled around Athens and considered them with a critical eye. He wrote that he doubted the literal existence of Atlantis, suggesting that Plato had invented it, perhaps as a philosophical illustration, a story meant to teach rather than to record. Imagine Aristotle sitting in the sun-dappled halls of the Lyceum, scrolls spread before him, students at his side, discussing politics, ethics, and the nature of reality. When the subject of Atlantis arose, he may have leaned back and said quietly, almost in passing, "Plato made it up." Not with scorn, but with the analytical distance that defined his approach to knowledge. To him, the story was a tool, a mirror reflecting ideas about morality and governance, rather than a historical record of a submerged empire. And yet, even as Aristotle dismissed the literal truth, the story did not vanish. It continued to drift through the minds of Greek scholars and storytellers, tucked into writings that would survive the centuries. Plutarch, writing long after Aristotle, mentions Atlantis in passing, noting Plato's account and reflecting on the philosophical significance rather than its geographical reality. He treats it as a moral lesson, a story to ponder and to learn from, much like the fables of old. Other thinkers, such as Proclus, preserved fragments of Plato's dialogues and commented on the tale, keeping it alive through marginal notes and careful references. They understood that whether real or allegorical, the story contained lessons and imagery powerful enough to endure beyond the limitations of a single generation. Through these quiet whispers, the memory of Atlantis persisted, even as the certainty of its existence became murky. By the time the Roman world came into prominence, Atlantis had begun to slip from the forefront of public thought. Greek mythology, with its pantheon of gods and heroes, dominated the imagination. The Trojan War, the tales of Hercules, the journeys of Odysseus. These stories captured attention and became woven into the cultural fabric. Atlantis, by contrast, receded, remembered by a few scholars and philosophers, tucked away in libraries, surviving in fragments rather than as a living tale told around fires. Picture the quiet libraries of Rome, scrolls stacked high, wax tablets inscribed with careful letters. Among them lies Plato's account of Atlantis, read by attentive scholars who marvel at its scale, its imagination, its warning. Yet the general public knows little of it. It exists in whispers, in footnotes, in the occasional remark by someone who has studied Plato closely. The story becomes something of a ghost, present but barely visible, its echoes fading beneath the clamour of other histories. It is in this fading that the magic of Atlantis endures, for when a story becomes elusive, it invites the imagination to fill the gaps. Without a concrete location, without material evidence, Atlantis drifts like a shadow over the minds of those who hear of it. It is easy to embellish, to dream, to wonder. The lack of certainty is not a weakness but a strength, allowing each generation to encounter the legend anew, to imagine what might have been. Even in these early centuries then, Atlantis had begun its dual existence. It was both a story and a symbol, a cautionary tale, a moral lesson, a mystery that defied explanation. Scholars debated its truth, poets mused over its splendor, philosophers reflected on its meaning, and ordinary people heard only fragments of the story, enough to know that somewhere beyond the known world lay a city that had risen and fallen, carrying lessons across the ages. And so the tale of Atlantis drifts through antiquity like a quiet current beneath the surface of history. It is overshadowed by other stories, by myths of gods, by epics of war, by histories of empires that can be traced with stones and inscriptions. Yet it survives, persistent, subtle, waiting in the margins for those willing to listen. Imagine walking through the streets of Athens or Rome in those times, perhaps stopping at a quiet marketplace at dusk, hearing whispers of a lost island beyond the Pillars of Hercules. You may not have seen the city yourself, nor even believed it fully, yet the idea lingers. A vision of what human ambition and divine favor might achieve, and of how quickly it might be undone. There is a quiet fascination in this survival. Unlike other tales, Atlantis does not end definitively. It leaves questions, openings, possibilities. Did it exist? If so, where? If not, why did Plato choose to tell this particular story? These questions are not burdens, they are invitations. They invite the mind to wander, to imagine, to drift along the currents of history and legend alike. And though Atlantis fades from the main stage of ancient storytelling, it leaves traces in culture, in thought, in the imagination of those who care to notice. It reminds us that history is not merely a record of facts, but a living conversation across time. Each generation interprets the past in its own way, and each story that survives owes its persistence not to certainty, but to the power of human curiosity and wonder. So tonight, as you rest and the world outside grows quiet, think of the whispers of Atlantis drifting across the centuries. Consider the scholars who doubted, the philosophers who preserved, the storytellers who passed it along in fragments. Picture the story moving like a gentle tide, hidden beneath layers of other histories, yet always present, always reaching toward those who will listen. Atlantis, in these ancient echoes, becomes more than a place. It becomes a symbol of mystery itself. The idea that the world contains more than we can fully know, that beneath what is seen lies what is imagined, and that even in the face of skepticism, stories can endure, floating gently like leaves upon a river, waiting for someone to notice them and follow where they drift. And as we listen to these echoes tonight, let us feel the quiet thrill of discovery, even in absence. The fascination of Atlantis does not require proof. It requires attention, imagination, and a willingness to let the mind wander. In that wandering, the legend comes alive again. It shimmers in the dark, unseen, but undeniable, a memory of wonder reaching across time, whispering softly to those willing to hear. The story, in its ancient echoes, reminds us that even forgotten civilizations leave traces, even in absence. And though the world may have moved on and other myths may have taken center stage, Atlantis lingers, elusive and captivating, a reminder that history is not merely what we know, but also what we wonder, what we dream, and what continues to call to us from the depths of time. Tonight, we carry that whisper with us. We listen to the echoes of Aristotle's doubt, to Plutarch's passing mentions, to Proclus' careful notes. We follow the currents of memory and imagination, drifting through centuries of fascination and fading attention, and we allow the story of Atlantis to settle gently into our minds. And in this quiet moment, we understand something profound. The legend survives because it must. It survives because human curiosity cannot help but chase what lies just out of reach, and because some mysteries, like Atlantis, are never meant to be fully solved. They are meant to live in the imagination, where they can continue to inspire, to caution, and to invite wonder. As the centuries pass, Atlantis drifts further into shadow. In medieval Europe, a world shaped by faith, feudal kingdoms, and the slow rhythm of daily life, Plato's dialogues are known to only a handful of scholars. The story of a sunken city beyond the Pillars of Hercules is largely forgotten, replaced in the minds of ordinary people by tales drawn from the Bible. Floods that sweep the world, lost lands punished by divine wrath, and the moral lessons of ancient prophets. Imagine a quiet scriptorium, the air thick with the scent of ink and parchment. Monks work carefully under flickering candlelight, copying texts, illuminating letters with gold leaf, preserving knowledge for the next generation. In such a place, the faint echo of Atlantis survives in fragmentary Greek manuscripts. Perhaps a learned monk glimpses the mention of Poseidon's island in Plato's words, pauses and wonders at the grandeur described, only to return to the pressing work of transcribing scripture. For most of medieval Europe, stories of great floods, lost lands, and civilizations swallowed by water are interpreted entirely through a biblical lens. The story of Atlantis merges, in imagination at least, with the great flood of Noah. People speak of the earth washed clean, of civilizations judged and destroyed, and of humanity's fleeting time on this fragile world. Atlantis, if it exists at all in memory, becomes a shadow, a faint echo blending with tales of Eden and divine punishment. The concept of a vanished empire beyond the sea does not fit neatly into the worldview of medieval Christendom, and so it slips quietly into obscurity. Yet even in this obscurity, the allure of Atlantis never completely disappears. Its echoes linger like soft currents beneath a calm river. Scholars and travelers occasionally encounter fragments of Plato's writings, and the seeds of curiosity persist, waiting for the right moment to bloom. That moment comes with the Renaissance, a rebirth of learning, curiosity, and a renewed fascination with the ancient world. Picture Florence or Venice in the 15th century, cities alive with merchants, artists, and philosophers. Manuscripts from ancient Greece are being rediscovered, translated, and studied with fresh eyes. Latin scholars pore over texts, unveiling the words of Plato for a new generation hungry for knowledge. In these quiet, candle-lit studies, Atlantis begins to rise from the shadows once more. The Renaissance thinkers are captivated. Unlike medieval scholars, whose focus remained largely on scripture, these humanists approach Plato with a blend of reverence and curiosity. They read of the mighty island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, of its vast cities, its wealth of metals and resources, its ingenious canals and concentric rings. To them, Atlantis is both marvelous and mysterious, a civilization lost to time, echoing the grandeur of human achievement and the peril of ambition. Many Renaissance scholars attempt to reconcile Plato's account with the biblical stories that dominated European thought. Could Atlantis have been the Garden of Eden, a paradise lost? Could the great flood that swallowed the island be connected to Noah's deluge? In these interpretations, the legend of Atlantis becomes layered, entwined with familiar narratives, yet retaining its own distinctive allure. It is no longer simply a Greek tale, it is now a bridge connecting myth, history, and moral reflection. Imagine a scholar in Venice, quill in hand, cross-referencing Plato with the Book of Genesis. He notes the parallels: a thriving civilization punished for hubris, divine forces intervening to restore balance, and the moral undertones of pride and corruption. Atlantis becomes both curiosity and cautionary tale, simultaneously a marvel of human imagination and a warning against the perils of excess and moral decay. Artists, too, are drawn to the legend. In illuminated manuscripts, they depict the concentric circles of Atlantis' capital city, the gleaming temples, the canals flowing like silver threads. Painters dream of the waters swallowing the city, illustrating the tension between human ambition and nature's inexorable power. For patrons and audiences alike, Atlantis sparks both wonder and reflection. The story circulates quietly across Europe. Scholars in France, Italy, and Spain discuss it in private salons, in the margins of their manuscripts, and during debates on philosophy and history. Even as most of the public remains unaware, the legend persists in the minds of those who study the ancients, seeding ideas that will resurface in later centuries. Atlantis is not merely a curiosity, it is a living thought, a metaphor that resonates with the Renaissance spirit, the belief that human reason and ingenuity can achieve greatness, tempered by the ever-present risk of hubris. And so, from the shadows of the medieval period into the light of the Renaissance, Atlantis undergoes a quiet transformation. No longer solely the vanished empire of Greek lore, it becomes a symbol, a nexus of imagination, morality, and history. The island beyond the Pillars of Hercules is both a place that may have been real and a story that must continue to be told, a tale that invites each generation to reflect on the fragility of civilization and the timeless consequences of ambition unchecked. In this period, the legend of Atlantis also begins to expand geographically and philosophically. Scholars ponder its possible location with increasing imagination, mapping it to distant oceans, linking it to lost continents, and imagining its cities restored in the mind's eye. The narrative evolves, embracing speculation while maintaining the moral and philosophical core that Plato originally intended. The island that vanished under the waves becomes a canvas for human curiosity, a dreamscape where the extraordinary and the impossible coexist. Yet for all its revival, Atlantis remains partly elusive. Unlike other ancient stories that can be tied to ruins, inscriptions, or continuous traditions, its evidence is contained within Plato's words alone. This ambiguity enhances its allure. Each reader, each thinker, each artist fills in the gaps with personal imagination. The unknown is vast, and it calls irresistibly to those who dream of discovery. And so, in the quiet of Renaissance study halls, in the flicker of candlelight on parchment, and in the careful contemplation of philosophers and artists, Atlantis returns. It is no longer merely a tale of divine kings and vanished cities. It is a story that challenges the imagination, questions the nature of power, and whispers softly about the fragility of human achievement. It is a reminder that even civilizations of staggering brilliance can vanish, leaving only memory, metaphor, and the persistent tug of wonder. Tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine those Renaissance scholars hunched over manuscripts, quills scratching, eyes tracing Plato's words, pondering the fate of an island empire lost to time. Imagine the flicker of light glinting off imagined orichalcum, the silent canals threading through an unseen city, the distant echo of waves consuming it all. In this quiet reflection, Atlantis is alive again, not as a certainty, but as possibility, an idea that stirs the mind and lingers gently in the imagination. And so, the legend survives, passing from one era to the next, slipping through centuries of shadow and light. From Plato to medieval doubt, from Renaissance curiosity to humanist reflection, Atlantis endures, both a story of wonder and a cautionary tale waiting for those who will listen, who will imagine, who will follow its currents wherever they may lead. By the time the 15th and 16th centuries arrive, the world has grown larger, brighter, and far more mysterious. The horizon has shifted. Oceans are no longer boundaries, but highways to lands unknown. Europe is ablaze with curiosity. Sailors, cartographers, and scholars are eager to uncover what lies beyond the familiar coasts. And in this age of discovery, the story of Atlantis awakens from its Renaissance slumber, stirring imaginations across the continent. Picture yourself in a bustling port city in Spain or Portugal, the scent of salt and tar mingling with the chatter of sailors preparing for voyages across the Atlantic. Ships with tall masts and billowing sails wait for favorable winds, their decks heavy with supplies, maps, and the weight of human ambition. Tales of distant islands, new peoples, and strange treasures circulate among the crowds carried by merchants, adventurers, and returning sailors. And somewhere, in the mix of curiosity and speculation, Plato's story of Atlantis surfaces again. The discovery of the New World, of vast lands beyond the Atlantic, ignites a renewed fascination with the lost continent. Suddenly, the idea that a great civilization could have existed and disappeared beneath the waves feels almost plausible. Explorers and scholars alike begin to wonder, could Atlantis have been somewhere in this vast, uncharted ocean? Could it be linked to the mysterious civilizations now being encountered across the seas? Even Christopher Columbus, though never explicitly claiming to have found Atlantis, navigated waters that inspired thoughts of lost lands and ancient legends. For men and women accustomed to the stories of Europe and the Mediterranean, the sheer scale of the Atlantic Ocean opens the mind to possibilities that once seemed impossible. A sunken empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules is no longer merely a story, it is a tantalizing question mark stretching across the horizon, waiting to be investigated. Spanish explorers, encountering the grandeur of the Aztec and Incan civilizations, cannot help but notice certain parallels with Plato's account. Massive cities of stone, sophisticated agriculture, elaborate systems of governance, vast wealth, and intricate craftsmanship. These features spark the imagination. Could these New World empires be echoes of the Atlanteans, survivors, or distant relatives of a civilization lost to the sea? The question floats like a whispered rumor through the courts of kings and the quiet halls of monasteries. Mapmakers of the era begin to incorporate speculation into their craft. Atlases and charts, meticulously drawn and carefully annotated, sometimes depict a mysterious landmass somewhere in the Atlantic, labeled Atlantis or Atlantica Insula. Though these depictions vary widely, the very act of placing Atlantis on a map transforms it from a philosophical tale into a part of the global imagination. Sailors glance at these maps and dream of discovering a sunken kingdom, of encountering treasures and knowledge preserved beneath the waves. Imagine the cartographers bent over their tables, ink-stained fingers tracing coastlines, imagining what lies beyond the edges of known continents. They draw islands in the open ocean, mountains rising from the depths, cities marked with concentric circles reminiscent of Plato's descriptions. Some of these maps are fanciful, others more restrained, but all contribute to the legend, giving it shape and presence beyond mere words. The fascination spreads beyond Spain and Portugal. France, England, and the Italian city-states engage in debates, speculation, and artistic imaginings of Atlantis. It becomes part of the cultural currency of the era, a story to discuss, to illustrate, to ponder over long nights in candlelit chambers. Scholars consider the possibility that the vast civilizations of the Americas might hold the key to understanding Atlantis, or at least echo its memory in stone, gold, and human ingenuity. The allure of Atlantis in this period is not only geographical, but moral and philosophical. It embodies the same duality that has always defined it: greatness and hubris, abundance and vulnerability. The discoveries of new lands and peoples serve as a mirror to European ambitions, raising questions about power, conquest, and the impermanence of even the mightiest societies. Explorers may marvel at distant cities and treasures, yet the story of Atlantis reminds them, as it reminds us, that civilizations can rise brilliantly only to vanish without warning. And so in the age of exploration, Atlantis becomes more than Plato's island or a philosophical allegory. It becomes a symbol of human curiosity, a challenge to the imagination, and a story that bridges continents. It exists in maps, in speculation, and in the whispered debates of sailors, scholars, and kings. It grows beyond the confines of the Mediterranean and spreads across the globe, riding on the winds of discovery and the tides of human wonder. Picture the explorers at sea, staring into the endless horizon, imagining a city glimmering beneath the waves, or an island of unimaginable wealth waiting just beyond sight. For them, Atlantis is a reminder that the world is larger than they know, that mysteries remain even in an age of seemingly limitless knowledge. It inspires dreams of adventure, discovery, and the uncovering of forgotten wonders. Even as some scholars insist on caution, insisting that Plato's story may be allegory, the legend thrives. The Atlantic, once a barrier, becomes a canvas for imagination. Atlantis as a concept is now intertwined with the New World, with unknown continents, and with the very human desire to uncover what lies hidden. The island that sank beneath the waves lives again, in thought, in speculation, and in every whispered story told aboard a wooden ship rocking on the ocean. By the end of this age, Atlantis is firmly established in the European imagination. It has travelled from Greek dialogues to Renaissance curiosity, from medieval whispers to maps inked with hope and speculation. It is no longer a story limited to philosophical debate. It is a global idea, a legend that inspires exploration and dreams, a narrative that encourages humanity to look beyond the known, to seek out wonders both real and imagined. And tonight, as you listen to these words, imagine yourself on one of those ships, the salt air in your hair, the endless sea stretching before you, the thrill of discovery tingling in your chest. Somewhere far beyond the horizon could lie the lost continent, or perhaps only the memory of it. But whether real or imagined, the story carries on, connecting explorers, scholars, dreamers, and us, here and now, across centuries. The age of exploration has awakened Atlantis again, planting it firmly in human consciousness. Its waters may be hidden, its cities lost, yet its story is alive, shimmering like sunlight on a distant wave, waiting for those willing to follow, to imagine, to dream. By the 19th century, the world had changed again. Steamships plied the oceans, telegraphs carried messages across continents in hours instead of months, and newspapers and books reached more eyes than ever before. Knowledge expanded rapidly, yet fascination with ancient mysteries, the shadows of the past and the secrets of lost civilizations, never waned. It was in this fertile environment of curiosity and expanding imagination that Atlantis experienced a dramatic rebirth. Not in the scholarly halls of Europe or the quiet libraries of Renaissance scholars, but in the pages of a single remarkable book. Ignatius Donnelly, a politician from Minnesota with a restless mind and a fascination for the mysterious, became the figure who would reignite the world's obsession with Atlantis. In 1882, he published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, a tome that would capture the imaginations of readers across continents, bridging scholarship, speculation, and the fertile soil of public fascination. Donnelly did not merely retell Plato's story. He amplified it, connected it to myths and monuments scattered across the globe, and built an intricate case for Atlantis as the source of all civilization. Imagine Donnelly at his desk, quill in hand, papers strewn across the room, eyes flicking between maps, manuscripts, and accounts of ancient cultures. He traced the paths of civilizations, noting the striking similarities between the pyramids of Egypt and the stepped temples of the Americas, the myths of floods in Mesopotamia, and the legends of the Pacific Islands. For him, these were not coincidences. They were clues, fragments of a greater, forgotten history pointing toward a civilization that had once ruled the world and then vanished beneath the waves. Donnelly argued that Atlantis had been the mother of human progress. Its inhabitants, endowed with knowledge and skill lost to the ages, had spread their influence to Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Americas, and beyond. He suggested that the flood myths found across cultures were not mere metaphor or coincidence, but memories of a single cataclysm, the final destruction of Atlantis. Every pyramid, every monument, every unexplained artifact became, in his interpretation, a faint echo of Atlantean ingenuity. The book was a sensation. Readers devoured its pages with the same intensity that they might savor a gripping novel. The idea that humanity had once achieved unprecedented greatness only to lose it all captured the imagination of Europe and America alike. Book clubs debated its theories, lectures discussed its implications. From salons in Paris to drawing rooms in Boston, people whispered of the sunken continent, tracing its imagined coasts on maps, pondering the treasures that might still lie beneath the Atlantic waves. Donnelly's work marked a turning point. Atlantis was no longer just a philosophical allegory or a curiosity tucked away in old manuscripts. It became a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of human ambition, loss, and the tantalizing possibility of rediscovery. The story was accessible, vivid, and urgent. His description of Atlantis's splendor, its advanced knowledge, and its sudden destruction transformed it from a distant myth into a narrative that felt immediate, tangible, and almost within reach. At the same time, Donnelly's approach helped fuel the rise of pseudo-archaeology. Enthusiasts inspired by his sweeping claims began to seek evidence of Atlantis in every corner of the earth, in the sands of Africa, the jungles of Central America, and even beneath the frozen expanses of Antarctica. Maps were redrawn, expeditions planned, and treasure hunters dreamed of uncovering Atlantean artifacts. Some of these searches were careful and methodical, while others bordered on the fanciful. Yet all were animated by the same irresistible pull, the hope of finding a civilization lost, yet preserved somewhere, waiting to be discovered. Imagine, for a moment, the thrill of such quests. You are aboard a ship, cutting through mist-laden seas, imagining the remains of Atlantean temples beneath the waves, gold and orichalcum glinting in the deep. Each mysterious mound of stone, each unexplained ruin on an island, becomes a potential clue, a fragment of a forgotten world. Donnelly's ideas transformed imagination into action, making the pursuit of Atlantis not just a story, but a quest that people could undertake. Yet the popularity of Donnelly's book also sparked debate. Scholars criticized his sweeping generalizations and lack of rigorous evidence. Critics warned against conflating myth with history, cautioning that his arguments, while captivating, often relied on speculation rather than concrete proof. But these criticisms did little to dampen the public's fascination. If anything, the aura of controversy heightened the allure. Atlantis became a mystery worth chasing precisely because it was elusive, defying the neat boundaries of science and history. By the end of the 19th century, Atlantis had become firmly entrenched in the cultural imagination. It appeared in literature, illustrations, lectures, and the burgeoning field of speculative archaeology. It was both warning and inspiration, a tale of hubris and brilliance, of knowledge lost and adventure awaiting. Donnelly's vision, whether historically accurate or not, had given the world a lens through which to explore the possibilities of human achievement, the fragility of civilizations, and the enduring power of myth. Tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, picture the late 19th century reader curled up with Donnelly's book by lamplight. Imagine the thrill of turning each page, tracing the imagined cities of Atlantis, marveling at their splendor and pondering the fate of a civilization so vast, so advanced, that it could vanish without a trace. Feel the excitement of explorers preparing for distant voyages, of scholars debating in hushed tones, of artists illustrating cities that exist only in imagination. Donnelly's Atlantis is more than a story. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's desires, fears, and curiosity. It embodies the dream that knowledge, technology, and civilization can achieve wonders, but also the warning that these wonders are fragile, that pride and greed can undo even the greatest achievements. And in the quiet of the night, as you listen and imagine, this story reaches across time, connecting the scholars, explorers, and dreamers of the past to your own mind, inviting you to follow the currents of wonder wherever they may lead. By the end of the 19th century, the stage is set for Atlantis to enter the 20th century, ready to be explored not just in books but in expeditions, in media, and in the modern fascination with mysteries of the past. The legend, revitalized by Donnelly, will not fade. It has become a force that draws people to the edge of the known world, into the depths of imagination, and across oceans of possibility. And tonight, as the world outside grows quiet and your thoughts drift, imagine the glimmering city beneath the waves. Picture its temples, its canals, its shining orichalcum, and the whispers of the past reaching through centuries, connecting Plato to Donnelly, scholars to explorers, imagination to reality. The obsession of the 19th century reminds us that some mysteries never truly die. They only wait patiently for those willing to listen and dream. As the 20th century dawns, Atlantis drifts once again, this time into the realm of the mystical and the spiritual. Beyond the maps, beyond the expeditions, beyond the debates of scholars and treasure hunters, Atlantis begins to inhabit the minds of those seeking not only history, but hidden wisdom. A civilization not merely lost beneath the waves, but holding secrets of human potential, cosmic truths, and the mysteries of the soul. Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, is among the first to breathe this spiritual life into Atlantis. She envisions it not merely as a city, but as the cradle of ancient humanity, a home of knowledge and power, a stage upon which the earliest stages of human consciousness were tested and refined. In her writings, Atlantis becomes the home of what she calls the root races, successive waves of humanity, each evolving in spirit and ability, each connected to the cosmos in ways that modern eyes struggle to perceive. Imagine Blavatsky at her desk, her candles flickering, the night quiet around her, as she contemplates the vastness of human history. She envisions cities built not just of stone and metal, but of intention and spiritual energy, a civilization whose inhabitants possess wisdom and psychic abilities that modern humans can barely imagine. To her, Atlantis is a beacon of potential, a mirror of what humanity might achieve when mind, spirit, and nature exist in harmony. In the decades that follow, other spiritual thinkers expand upon this vision. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, offers vivid psychic glimpses of Atlantis during his trance readings. His descriptions are detailed and astonishing. Advanced technologies, intricate machines powered by crystals, flying vessels gliding across the oceans, and a society governed by principles of both science and spirituality. For Cayce, Atlantis is not myth, not speculation. It is history, memory, and prophecy intertwined. Picture Cayce in his trance, a soft voice emerging as if from another world, recounting the glories of Atlantis. He speaks of cities with pyramids taller than any yet built, of knowledge that harmonizes the human spirit with the energies of the earth, of a people who walked the line between divine insight and earthly ambition. And he speaks too of the fall, the warning echoing through time, a civilization undone by pride, by greed, by a failure to align with the natural and spiritual laws of the world. For spiritual seekers, Atlantis becomes more than an archaeological curiosity. It becomes a symbol, a touchstone for meditation and introspection, a reminder that the past is alive with meaning, that human potential is vast, and that wisdom can be lost as easily as it can be gained. To imagine Atlantis in this way is to enter a quiet reverie where history and myth merge, where lessons are hidden not in scrolls or ruins, but in the mind and heart. In spiritual circles, the story of Atlantis sparks fascination, reflection, and study. Lectures, pamphlets, and books circulate among those drawn to the mystical. Discussions flourish about the moral and spiritual lessons to be learned from the rise and fall of such an advanced civilization. Atlantis is no longer simply a distant land beyond the sea. It is a metaphor for human consciousness, a mirror reflecting both our potential and our vulnerability. Consider the imagery that emerges from these interpretations: radiant cities of crystal and gold, vast libraries filled with knowledge of both matter and spirit, canals that channel not just water, but energy, and temples designed to harmonize with the cosmos itself. The people of Atlantis in these visions are attuned to both the physical and spiritual realms, moving gracefully between knowledge and intuition, science and mysticism. Yet, even as Atlantis assumes this spiritual mantle, it retains the warning of the past. Blavatsky, Casey, and their followers emphasize the consequences of hubris, greed, and moral failure. Atlantis becomes both a symbol of what humanity could achieve and a cautionary tale of what can be lost when knowledge is divorced from ethics and wisdom. In these visions, the lessons of the ancient world are timeless, echoing softly through the currents of thought, reminding us of our own potential and responsibility. Imagine tonight letting your mind drift into this vision. Picture the Atlantean cities shimmering beneath the sun, their spires and temples aligned with the stars. Imagine the hum of machines powered by crystals, the quiet contemplation of scholars and mystics walking streets paved with glowing stone. Hear the whispers of ancient wisdom carried on the wind, a language of insight older than any modern tongue. In this quiet reverie, Atlantis is alive, not in the world of ruins or maps, but in the imagination and the soul. Even as some skeptics dismiss these visions, the story endures. For those who are drawn to it, Atlantis is not about proof, evidence, or archaeology. It is about possibility, wonder, and reflection. It becomes a lens through which to examine human potential, to explore the connection between morality, knowledge, and the cycles of rise and fall that seem to repeat throughout history. Atlantis, in this spiritual imagination, is a mirror of our own world, an invitation to contemplate what might be gained or lost depending on the choices humanity makes. Through the 20th century, Atlantis continues to inspire seekers, writers, and thinkers. It appears in psychic literature, in mystical discussions, and even in popular culture, always retaining its dual identity. A lost world beneath the waves, and a symbol of hidden wisdom waiting to be discovered. It invites us to explore not just the past, but the future of human consciousness, the potentials that remain dormant within us, the knowledge that may yet be awakened. And tonight, as you sink deeper into sleep, imagine these Atlantean streets alive, not with noise and commerce, but with quiet contemplation, with the gentle hum of understanding flowing through every street, temple, and palace. Imagine a civilization that valued not only material achievement, but insight, harmony, and spiritual alignment. Picture the glimmering towers reaching for the stars, canals reflecting the constellations, and the soft whisper of wisdom carried across time. Atlantis, in the spiritual imagination, becomes a place to visit without leaving your room, a world to explore in your mind, a dream to carry as you drift into sleep. It is a reminder that some knowledge is not found in excavation or maps, but in reflection, imagination, and the quiet listening to whispers of the past. Even as the modern world moves forward, racing with technology, science, and progress, Atlantis endures as a gentle echo, a story that asks us to slow down, to dream, to imagine, and to consider the deeper lessons of history. It is a legend that exists simultaneously in reality and possibility, a civilization both lost and ever-present, waiting for those willing to look beneath the surface, both of the world and of the mind. So tonight, as your eyelids grow heavy, let yourself drift into this vision of Atlantis. Radiant, wise, and timeless. Feel its presence as a soft current beneath the surface of thought, a reminder of what has been, what might have been, and what could yet inspire within your own imagination. The city beneath the waves is not gone. It lives in the whispers, the dreams, and the quiet reflections of those who pause to listen. As the 20th century unfolds, Atlantis gradually drifts from the world of mystical visions and imaginative literature into the domain of science. The oceans, vast and uncharted, beckon with the promise of discovery. Suddenly, Atlantis is no longer confined to maps, theories, or psychic impressions, becomes a question to be answered, a puzzle to be solved by those willing to explore the depths of the Earth itself. Picture a quiet laboratory or an oceanographic institute in the 1930s or 1940s. Scientists hunch over maps, sonar readings, and early underwater photographs. Geologists examine rock formations, studying sediment layers that have shifted over millions of years. Archaeologists pore over accounts of ancient civilizations, comparing coastal settlements with the hints of ruins emerging from beneath the waves. The lure of Atlantis, though faint, motivates these early explorers to peer into the hidden corners of our planet. The Atlantic Ocean, vast and mysterious, becomes the prime hunting ground. Researchers study the sea floor, scanning for anomalies, formations that could suggest the remains of a lost continent. Some sites spark excitement and speculation, capturing the attention of the public. One of the most famous examples is the Bimini Road, discovered in the 1960s off the coast of the Bahamas. Long, straight lines of underwater stones, arranged in what appears to be a deliberate pattern, seem to hint at walls, streets, or pathways. For a moment, it is tempting to imagine the echoes of an Atlantean city lying silent beneath the waves, waiting to be rediscovered. Then there is Yonaguni, off the coast of Japan, an underwater formation that resembles terraces, steps, and platforms. Its sheer scale and precision inspire awe. Could it be the remains of an ancient civilization, submerged by rising seas? Or is it, as many geologists insist, a natural phenomenon shaped over millennia by erosion and tectonic forces? The debate persists, highlighting the tension between wonder and skepticism, imagination and evidence. Other submerged structures, reefs, and anomalies are discovered around the world, each prompting whispers of Atlantis. Sunken cities, remnants of walls, submerged pyramids. These are often revealed by chance, washed free by storms, shifting sands, or modern sonar technology. Each discovery carries the tantalizing possibility that the lost continent might be more than myth. Yet time and study frequently explain these structures as natural formations. Still, the sense of mystery lingers, subtle and persistent, like the soft hum of a current beneath the surface of the sea. Scientific investigations also explore the geology of the Atlantic itself. Continental drift, tectonic shifts, and rising sea levels offer rational explanations for submerged landforms. Islands have disappeared, coastlines have shifted, and ancient civilizations may have been lost to local flooding. Yet, the specific grandeur of Plato's description, an empire spanning continents, glittering with orichalcum, commanding fleets across Europe and Africa, remains unmatched in the geological record. This discrepancy fuels both skepticism and the allure of continued exploration. Oceanographers and archaeologists work carefully, often under the public gaze. Expeditions deploy divers, sonar equipment, and underwater cameras, scanning the seabed for structures that could belong to an ancient civilization. They examine formations for signs of human activity, tool marks, patterns, and artifacts. But most of the time, the ocean keeps its secrets. Natural formations, coral growth, and shifting sediments explain many anomalies. And yet the hope persists that perhaps in some unexplored trench or abyss, remnants of Atlantis might still lie hidden. Even the most serious scholars approach the legend with caution. Many dismiss it as allegory, as Plato's cautionary tale about hubris and morality, rather than a literal account. Yet even in dismissing it, the story exerts a subtle influence. It challenges assumptions, inspires questions, and fuels research that might otherwise never have occurred. The search for Atlantis, even when unsuccessful, pushes the boundaries of human knowledge about the oceans, geology, and the history of civilizations. Imagine, tonight, standing on the deck of a research vessel. The waves lap gently against the hull, the wind whispers across the open sea, and the horizon stretches endlessly. You peer into the deep, imagining cities submerged, streets paved with glowing stones, temples reflecting sunlight from long ago. The ocean is quiet, almost meditative, yet beneath its surface mysteries linger, waiting for those patient enough to explore, curious enough to imagine. Even when evidence proves natural, the sense of wonder remains. Every peculiar rock formation, every line of stones or terraces becomes a story, a question mark in the vast expanse of the ocean. And every dive, every sonar scan, every careful analysis carries with it the possibility, however faint, of a discovery that could change our understanding of history. Atlantis persists not just as a story, but as an invitation to look beyond the obvious, to wonder at the hidden, and to respect the depths of the natural world. The 20th century also brings technology that allows us to explore previously inaccessible depths. Submersibles, remote-controlled cameras, and satellite mapping provide glimpses of the ocean floor that previous generations could only dream of. Even with these advances, however, Atlantis remains elusive. The evidence simply does not match the grandeur of Plato's tale. Yet in these very searches, the legend endures, subtly influencing the scientific imagination, inspiring the pursuit of knowledge, and reminding us that some mysteries are compelling precisely because they are never fully solved. Tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine being among those explorers, suspended in the dark waters, light from lamps reflecting softly off stone formations. Hear the muffled rush of currents, the gentle sway of the ocean, the silent anticipation of uncovering something extraordinary. Whether natural or human-made, the ocean floor carries whispers of the past, hints of civilizations, and the enduring lure of Atlantis. And even as serious scholars caution against expecting proof, the story lives on in human curiosity. It teaches patience, humility, and the quiet thrill of exploration. Atlantis is not merely a destination to be found, it is a journey, a meditation on what might be hidden, what might once have been, and what continues to inspire across centuries and oceans alike. So tonight, as your mind drifts and the world outside grows quiet, picture the sunken continent lying just beneath the waves. Imagine the glint of sunlight filtering through water onto terraces and walls, the imagined streets winding between temples, the soft echo of a civilization that may have been real or may exist only in memory. The oceans keep their secrets, but the story persists, gently flowing through time, carried in the currents of human wonder, curiosity, and imagination. Atlantis, in the age of science, remains just out of reach, a challenge to explore, a mystery to ponder, and a dream to carry as you drift into sleep. Its ruins may be hidden, its artifacts submerged, yet the legend endures like the slow, steady pulse of the ocean itself. As the story of Atlantis drifts through time, one question persists like a gentle whisper beneath the waves. Where, exactly, was this legendary continent? Plato's account offers tantalizing clues, yet leaves enough ambiguity to keep imaginations wandering for millennia. Tonight, we sail not across oceans, but through theories, maps, and dreams, tracing the elusive geography of Atlantis, following the hints left by those who have searched, speculated, and wondered. Plato, speaking of Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, gives our first compass point. Most scholars understand this to refer to the Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow bottleneck connecting the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean. Yet even with this seemingly simple marker, the legend quickly broadens. Beyond those straits lies a vast, unexplored ocean in Plato's time, a realm of mystery and possibility. And so the search begins. Consider the Atlantic Ocean itself. It is the most intuitive candidate, lending its name to the lost continent. Early theorists often imagined Atlantis somewhere amidst the expanse, hidden beneath waves that stretch from Europe and Africa to the Americas. The Azores, a cluster of islands rising from the mid-Atlantic, have long tempted dreamers. Could these rocky outcrops be the surviving peaks of a sunken empire, remnants of Plato's world? Nearby, the Canary Islands spark similar speculation, their volcanic peaks hinting at landforms shaped by ancient forces, perhaps linked to a vanished civilization. Then there is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, an underwater mountain chain stretching thousands of kilometers. Some explorers and researchers have speculated that a large landmass might have once existed here, now submerged beneath kilometers of water. Imagine for a moment a civilization of gleaming cities, canals, and temples resting on these sunken slopes hidden from sight, yet preserved in the dark currents, whispering their story to those willing to listen. Santorini, or ancient Thera, offers a different type of clue. Around 1600 BCE, the island experienced one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history, an explosion so powerful it reshaped the surrounding Aegean Sea. Tsunamis would have swept across nearby islands, devastating settlements and leaving the echoes of destruction etched into memory and myth. Some theorists argue that this cataclysm could have inspired Plato's tale, a local catastrophe magnified into a grand oceanic legend. The Minoan civilization, with its sophisticated architecture, advanced engineering, and cultural reach, seems a plausible fragment of what Plato may have known or heard. Yet the scale described in the dialogues as an empire spanning continents remains unmatched, leaving the imagination free to soar. Beyond these more widely accepted ideas, fringe theories stretch the mind further. Some link Atlantis to Antarctica, imagining a pre-Ice Age civilization submerged by advancing glaciers. Others point to South America, Ireland, or even remote islands scattered across the Pacific. Each location offers peculiar coincidences, circular formations, mysterious ruins, or local legends that echo themes from Plato's account. While mainstream science largely dismisses these ideas, their appeal endures, reminding us that the human mind delights in filling gaps with possibility. One particularly striking formation is the Richat structure in Mauritania, the Eye of the Sahara. Seen from above, it forms concentric circles, remarkably reminiscent of Plato's description of Atlantis's capital city. rings of land and water arranged with careful symmetry. Could this be a remnant of the fabled city? Or is it simply a natural geological marvel sculpted over eons by erosion and tectonic activity? As with much of the Atlantis debate, certainty eludes us. The Eye of the Sahara remains a dreamlike marker on the map, a location that invites speculation without demanding it. The endless appeal of guessing Atlantis's location lies not only in the thrill of discovery, but in the act of imagination itself. Each theory, whether plausible or far-fetched, offers a portal to another world. Picture the Azores emerging from misty seas, glimmering in the morning sun, streets and temples faintly visible beneath the waves. Imagine Santorini's ruins, half buried in volcanic ash, whispering stories of sudden destruction. Envision Antarctica's icy expanse, concealing lost cities beneath glaciers, or the Eye of the Sahara, a desert bullseye quietly waiting for the imagination to draw the lines that Plato once described. There is a kind of meditative pleasure in these speculations. As we drift from theory to theory, we are not seeking definitive proof, but rather the sense of possibility. The ocean stretches endlessly, the desert sprawls silently, the ice waits cold and unyielding. In this quiet, the mind wanders freely, tracing coastlines, imagining cities, and listening for the faint echoes of a civilization lost to time. And tonight, as your thoughts drift and your eyelids grow heavy, picture yourself tracing these maps, letting each proposed location unfold in your mind. See the waves lapping against imagined shores, feel the warmth of distant sun on vanished plazas, hear the distant bells of temples long submerged. The mystery of Atlantis is as much about the journey of the mind as the search for historical evidence. Each theory, no matter how improbable, invites reflection, wonder, and quiet dreaming. The search for Atlantis geography reminds us that some questions are meant to be pondered rather than solved. They exist to spark curiosity, to carry imagination across oceans and continents, to keep the whispers of the past alive. Perhaps the exact location will never be known. Perhaps the continent never existed in the literal sense. Yet the act of dreaming, of imagining Atlantis in these countless forms, ensures that the story continues, reaching from Plato's ancient dialogues to our own quiet nights of contemplation. Even as centuries pass and oceans hide their secrets, Atlantis refuses to vanish entirely. It seeps quietly into the myths, legends, and memories of countless cultures, appearing in different forms yet echoing the same essential story. A great civilization, radiant and powerful, undone by catastrophe. Tonight we drift softly across these tales, tracing the subtle threads that keep the memory of Atlantis alive, as if it were a shared dream in the collective mind of humanity. Consider the flood myths of Mesopotamia. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim survives a deluge sent by the gods to cleanse the world, building a vessel that preserves life through the waters. The story is rich with detail, capturing the terror, the suddenness, and the sorrow of a civilization swept away by forces beyond human control. Now imagine hearing this story on the banks of the Euphrates, generations before Plato's dialogues, and sensing a resonance, a memory of a people and a time lost beneath the waves. Turn to the biblical account of Noah. He is chosen to survive a cataclysmic flood, building an ark to save humanity and the animals. The waters rise, cities vanish, mountains disappear beneath waves. To the hearers of this tale, it is not simply a story of survival, but a cautionary narrative of hubris, morality, and the consequences of human failure. Listen closely, and you can hear the faint echo of Atlantis in Noah's flood, the warning of civilizations that reached too far, too fast, and paid the price. Across the oceans and continents, similar patterns appear. In Hindu texts, great floods mark transitions between ages, the cycles of creation and destruction weaving a tapestry of cosmic order and human impermanence. The Matsya Purana speaks of a divine savior who preserves knowledge and life through devastating waters, once again hinting at a memory of lost lands, of people whose lives vanished under the tides. In every case, the story resonates with Plato's Atlantis: power and prosperity, sudden catastrophe, survival, and memory. This repetition across cultures has fascinated historians and dreamers alike. Could Atlantis then be more than a story from ancient Greece? Perhaps it is an archetype, a universal memory of catastrophe encoded in myth and legend, carried across oceans and generations. Floods, lost lands, sunken cities. These are not merely coincidences, but a shared reflection of human experience, distilled into narrative form. Plato's tale may have been a story with a point, but it also taps into a deeper memory, a subtle pulse running beneath civilizations that have long since vanished. The archetype of the lost golden age emerges here as well. Many cultures speak of earlier epochs of harmony, wisdom, and abundance. The Atlantean golden age, where justice, knowledge, and divine insight prevailed, finds parallels in other myths. The idyllic times before the fall, the age of heroes, the periods of peace and prosperity that humans can only glimpse in memory or imagination. These stories share common threads, humans reaching the height of potential, only to falter and be swept away by natural or moral forces. In them, Atlantis is not a place on a map, but a mirror reflecting the cycles of rise and fall, reminding us of both the fragility and resilience of civilization. Picture tonight, if you will, drifting through these stories as if walking from village to village across time and space. On the banks of the Euphrates, a storyteller whispers the tale of Utnapishtim, the Ark, and the waters that rose. In the hills of Judea, elders recount Noah's flood in soft, serious tones. Across India, sages describe the ages of humanity, the floods, and the divine preserver. Though separated by language, culture, and geography, the tales resonate in the same rhythm, echoing the rise and fall of Atlantis, or perhaps the echo of Atlantis itself, existing not in a single place but in the memory of humankind. Even when civilizations forget specific details, the archetype persists. It teaches, warns, and fascinates. Atlantis becomes a symbol of lost knowledge, a reminder that no matter how advanced a society may become, it remains subject to the forces of nature, the consequences of hubris, and the inevitability of change. The shared memory of catastrophe, the golden age before the fall, travels like a gentle current through human history, quietly shaping imagination and expectation. Some scholars suggest that this repeated motif is not proof of a real Atlantis, but a reflection of universal fears and aspirations. Humanity, across continents and centuries, has always imagined both the heights of achievement and the depths of loss. Floods and vanished lands are metaphors for moral, environmental, and social lessons. Reminders to cherish knowledge, temper ambition, and respect the fragile balance of civilization. Yet even if Atlantis is not literally the source of all these myths, it embodies them perfectly, standing as the single story that captures their essence. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine drifting from one ancient culture to another, following the invisible threads of these stories. Feel the waters rise slowly, carrying away cities and temples, yet preserving lessons in memory and narrative. Hear the faint voices of elders and storytellers whispering across time. Remember the past, heed the consequences, honor knowledge, and dream wisely. Atlantis floats gently among these tales, at once real and imagined, a symbol of what has been lost and what continues to guide us through the currents of human history. Even today, the memory of Atlantis shapes how we think about our own world. Tales of lost civilizations remind us that human achievement is never permanent, that wealth and power can vanish, and that lessons of morality, prudence, and cooperation are timeless. The archetype endures, carried in myth, literature, psychology, and imagination, reminding us that the past is never truly gone, and that some stories continue to live because they speak to the deepest rhythms of human thought and experience. And so tonight, as your mind drifts in the quiet dark, let yourself wander through these whispers of flood, catastrophe, and renewal. Imagine Atlantis not only as Plato described it, or as spiritual thinkers envisioned it, but as a universal symbol, a golden age glimpsed in memory, a civilization whose rise and fall echoes in myths across the globe. Let it linger gently in your thoughts, a story that is both real and imagined, a reminder that the past, even when buried beneath oceans or lost in legend, continues to shape and inspire the present. In the end, Atlantis is memory itself, a reflection of what humans remember, fear, and dream. It is the archetype of the lost civilization, the vanished empire, the flood that teaches as it destroys. It exists not only in history books or underwater formations, but in the quiet corners of imagination, in the myths we tell, and in the stories we pass down from one generation to the next. As the centuries unfold, Atlantis drifts once again, not across oceans, but into the minds and imaginations of writers, poets, and artists. The city beneath the waves, the sunken empire, the golden civilization lost to hubris. It becomes a canvas upon which humanity paints its dreams, fears, and reflections. Tonight, we wander softly along these paths of imagination, tracing Atlantis as it takes shape in literature, an art where ink, brush, and imagination preserve what oceans have hidden. In the Renaissance, scholars and poets rediscover Plato's dialogues, and with them, the story of Atlantis begins to appear in the cultural consciousness of Europe. Renaissance poets, fascinated by the classical world, allude to Atlantis in verse and allegory. They are drawn to the grandeur of its architecture, the moral lessons in its rise and fall, and the dreamlike quality of a civilization glimpsed only through the whispers of history. Atlantis becomes a metaphor for perfection, ambition, and the fragility of human achievement, a subtle moral thread woven through poetry and philosophical reflection. During the Enlightenment, thinkers explore Atlantis with a different eye. Philosophers and writers consider it in the context of reason, science, and human progress. Could Atlantis be a cautionary tale, a lost civilization whose downfall offers a lesson in ethics, governance, or the misuse of knowledge? Or could it be an example of early societal order, a utopian model from which humanity might learn? Enlightenment writers approach the story with curiosity, measuring its plausibility, pondering its lessons, and allowing it to inhabit both rational inquiry and imaginative speculation. Romantic writers, in contrast, drift toward the emotional, the sublime, and the mysterious. To them, Atlantis is not a historical question to solve, but a dream to explore, a melancholy vision of beauty and loss. They write of cities glimmering beneath ocean waves, temples shining with the soft glow of orichalcum, streets lined with marble and canals that reflect the light of vanished suns. In these works, Atlantis is a realm of longing, a symbol of what has been lost to time and tides, a civilization both magnificent and unattainable. The 19th century brings new voices, including novelists who transform Atlantis into a stage for adventure, discovery, and utopian speculation. Jules Verne, though more widely known for voyages to the center of the Earth or undersea explorations, taps into this fascination with lost civilizations. In his works, Atlantis becomes a symbol of the unknown, the hidden, and the extraordinary, a place where imagination meets adventure and where science and wonder entwine. For readers, These tales are a gentle voyage, thrilling yet contemplative, offering glimpses of other worlds that exist both in possibility and metaphor. Atlantis also inspires the growth of utopian literature. Writers create imagined societies that draw upon Platonic ideals, depicting civilizations that balance knowledge, ethics, and natural harmony. Atlantis, in this context, is both template and warning, a model of what might be achieved when wisdom governs society, and a caution of what happens when human ambition eclipses morality. Authors explore cities that shine like jewels, citizens who embody virtue, and technologies far beyond their time, all while reminding readers of the fragility of such perfection. As science fiction emerges in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Atlantis becomes a frequent muse. Authors imagine the lost continent not only as a historical curiosity, but as a source of futuristic technology, advanced machines, and secret knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. Flying machines, energy sources unknown to modern science, and psychic abilities are often attributed to Atlanteans, merging the fascination with history, mythology, and human potential. In these stories, Atlantis bridges the past and future, becoming a symbol of what humanity might one day achieve, or what it might lose if hubris prevails. Artists, too, are captivated by the legend. Painters, illustrators, and engravers depict Atlantis with dramatic flair, cities gleaming beneath stormy seas, temples bathed in golden light, canals reflecting the soft glow of an imagined sun. Romantic and later symbolist artists capture both the grandeur and the melancholy of a civilization lost, portraying figures gazing across oceans, temples crumbling under tidal waves, and citizens frozen in moments of moral triumph or failure. These images, whether in the galleries of Europe or the illustrated pages of novels, give Atlantis a visual life that complements its literary existence. In literature and art alike, Atlantis carries dual roles. On one hand, it is a cautionary tale, a civilization undone by pride, corruption, or a failure to align with nature's forces. On the other, it is a utopian dream, a society that embodies wisdom, harmony, and technological marvels far beyond what most could imagine. The tension between warning and aspiration is what gives Atlantis its enduring appeal. It is both a mirror and a beacon, reflecting human fears while illuminating possibilities. Imagine tonight drifting through these works as if walking through a gallery of the mind. See the poetic descriptions of Atlantean streets paved with shining stone, canals cutting through radiant cities, temples adorned with metals that seem to glow from within. Hear the rhythmic cadence of verse and prose, echoing the rise and fall of an empire that never fully existed in space, yet thrives in imagination. Each painting, each passage, is a gentle current, guiding your thoughts beneath the waves, where history, myth, and dream converge. Even in modern literature and cinema, Atlantis retains its magnetism. From adventure novels to animated films, the sunken continent continues to spark curiosity, awe, and reflection. It inspires stories of discovery, moral lessons, and the quest for hidden knowledge. Children and adults alike are captivated, imagining cities shimmering beneath the waves, technology that surpasses our own, and the lessons that might be learned from the mistakes of a vanished people. Tonight, as you settle deeper into sleep, let these literary and artistic visions drift around you. Picture yourself walking along Atlantean canals, listening to poets describe its splendor, feeling the weight of history in every arch and column. Imagine reading a novel in which explorers uncover relics that shimmer with orichalcum, or gazing at a painting where sunlight filters through water to illuminate a long-lost temple. Atlantis in this space is not simply a story. It is a landscape of imagination, a place where morality, beauty, and mystery coexist. And so the legend continues. Atlantis in literature and art reminds us that even when the physical world hides its secrets, the human mind and spirit are free to explore, dream, and reflect. It encourages curiosity, fuels creativity, and nurtures wonder. As you drift tonight towards sleep, picture Atlantis in all its literary and artistic forms, radiant, tragic, aspirational, and enduring. Let it move quietly through your thoughts, a city beneath the waves, alive in imagination, guiding your dreams with gentle fascination. Atlantis, through the pages of books and the strokes of paint, lives forever. It reminds us that some stories are too compelling to fade, that some visions of civilization, both perfect and flawed, resonate across time and space. And tonight, in the quiet darkness, it becomes a companion for your wandering mind, a shimmering reflection of human aspiration, morality, and imagination, inviting you to dream, explore, and wonder as you drift ever deeper into sleep. As the 20th century marches onward, Atlantis slips gracefully from the pages of ancient dialogues and utopian novels into the vibrant and colorful world of popular culture. The oceans of imagination deepen, and the legend of a lost civilization rises to meet the eyes, ears, and hearts of new generations. Tonight, let us drift gently through these creative waters, observing how Atlantis is reborn, reshaped, and reimagined for each era, never fading, always intriguing. Films become one of the first portals to bring the story alive in motion. Early cinematic depictions often depict Atlantis as a mysterious, almost haunted place, a city of gleaming towers swallowed by waves, glimpsed only in dreamlike visions or through the fog of memory. These films blend history and fantasy, transporting audiences to worlds where the impossible feels tangible, where the allure of a lost empire is amplified by music, light, and imagination. As you picture it tonight, imagine the shimmering towers, the shadowy streets, and the whisper of water through sunken archways, all projected in flickering celluloid. Comics follow soon after, capturing the bold, dramatic possibilities of Atlantis. Illustrators imagine heroic Atlanteans, grand palaces, and powerful rulers, often entwined with moral lessons and fantastical plots. These stories allow readers to explore the city from angles Plato could not describe, imagining daring adventures along sunken streets, secret treasures hidden in underwater vaults, and the lives of those who may have walked the golden avenues of this lost civilization. Comics transform Atlantis into a living, breathing character, inviting readers to follow its narrative through page after page, issue after issue. Disney's Atlantis. The Lost Empire, released in 2001, introduces a new generation to the legend in a form that is both adventurous and visually dazzling. Imagine diving into this animated world, a sprawling city beneath the sea, pulsing with strange technologies and shimmering orichalcum, alive with culture, and yet on the brink of catastrophe. The film captures the duality of Atlantis perfectly. A civilization at its zenith, technologically advanced, yet vulnerable to human greed and hubris. It is a story that is thrilling, mysterious, and at its heart, cautionary, echoing Plato's timeless themes while engaging the imaginations of millions of viewers. Superhero mythologies also adopt Atlantis with vigor. In comic book worlds, Atlantis becomes home to kings, warriors, and champions, rulers of underwater kingdoms that coexist, conflict, or intersect with the human world. Aquaman, perhaps the most famous Atlantean in modern myth, embodies this fusion of legend and imagination. He represents both the majesty and the vulnerability of a hidden civilization, a figure navigating the boundary between surface and submerged worlds. Imagine tonight the glowing coral palaces, bustling underwater courts, and silent, majestic corridors, where heroes and kings weigh choices with consequences, echoing centuries of lost wisdom. Video games and fantasy literature extend the experience even further. In these worlds, Atlantis becomes a landscape to explore, a place to uncover secrets, solve puzzles, and encounter magic or advanced technology. Players navigate cities, temples, and labyrinthine corridors beneath waves, tracing the paths of a civilization imagined in ways that no one could fully predict. The legend adapts seamlessly to these interactive experiences, allowing every individual to wander through sunken streets, to imagine the hum of ancient machinery, or to feel the pulse of an empire lost in time. Even conspiracy theories, often shared in hushed tones online or whispered in books and forums, contribute to the ever-shifting image of Atlantis. Here, the lost continent becomes a site of secret knowledge, advanced ancient technology, or hidden power. Though evidence may be scarce and claims often fantastical, these modern tales continue the tradition of imagination layered atop mystery. They remind us that Atlantis, like the ocean itself, holds the power to captivate human curiosity, to inspire exploration, and to provoke the question, what lies beneath, just out of reach, waiting to be found? For each generation, Atlantis reshapes itself. The legend becomes a mirror reflecting contemporary hopes, fears, and creative energies. In the early 20th century, it inspires adventurous explorers and illustrators. Mid-century, it finds its place in the pages of pulp novels and comics. Later, it is animated, dramatized, and digitized for film, television, and video games. At each stage, the story adapts, yet its essence remains. A lost civilization, a moral lesson, a wonder to behold. Imagine tonight, drifting across decades, seeing Atlantis through the lens of each era. The sepia tones of early cinema, the bold inks of comic pages, the vibrant colors of animation, the immersive landscapes of games, and the shadowy corners of speculative theory. What remains constant is the city's allure. Atlantis embodies human fascination with what has been lost and the yearning to explore the unknown. It is a place of beauty and danger, wisdom and folly, innovation and hubris. Across films, comics, literature and games, we are invited to wander through temples, glide along canals and stand atop golden terraces, all while sensing that the tide, inevitable and inexorable, waits just beyond, ready to reclaim what was once grand. Tonight, let yourself imagine slipping beneath the waves, traveling through these modern visions. Hear the faint echo of Disney's music blending with the splash of ocean currents. Picture comic heroes darting through sunken streets, torches in hand, light glinting off golden walls. Feel the thrill of discovery, the curiosity that drives explorers in games, the pulse of imagination that fuels speculation in books and online forums. Atlantis exists here, alive and vivid, a city of dreams that never truly sinks, no matter how deep the ocean. In each of these forms, Atlantis continues to teach and enchant. It reminds us of our fascination with lost knowledge, our fear of hubris, and our unending curiosity about what lies hidden beneath the world we think we know. As you drift tonight through the story of Atlantis in pop culture, let yourself move seamlessly between the imagined cities of yesterday's comics, today's films, and tomorrow's games. Notice how each generation adds its own layer, yet all share the same core: wonder, mystery, and the irresistible pull of a civilization that, though lost, continues to live in imagination. And so tonight, as your mind drifts ever deeper, imagine Atlantis in all its forms: the cinematic city, the heroic kingdom, the digital labyrinth, the whispered secret. Each version is a reflection of human creativity, a testament to our desire to explore, to dream, and to imagine worlds beyond the visible. Atlantis in pop culture is more than story or legend. It is a living, breathing tapestry of ideas, forever inviting us to wander, to imagine, and to wonder as we drift quietly into sleep. As our journey through Atlantis drifts closer to the present, it is time to turn our gaze beneath the waves to the silent depths where modern science searches for answers and where myth and reality quietly intertwine. Tonight, we explore what we know, what we can infer, and what may forever remain a mystery, allowing the story of Atlantis to linger as both legend and symbol, even as tectonic plates shift silently beneath our feet. Oceanographers and geologists have mapped the sea floor with ever-increasing precision. Using sonar, satellites, and deep-sea submersibles, they have traced mountains, valleys, and plains hidden beneath kilometers of water. The ocean floor is a world unto itself, full of unexpected shapes and formations, some natural, some shaped by forces that can mimic human design. It is here, amid the rugged underwater landscapes, that Atlantis enthusiasts have long searched, hoping to catch a glimpse of a civilization lost to the tides. Modern science, however, presents a sobering perspective. A continent-sized landmass, as Plato described, simply could not have existed in the middle of the Atlantic without leaving clear geological evidence. Tectonic plates move, volcanoes erupt, and continental crust behaves in ways that make the sudden submergence of a massive empire highly improbable. Geologists point to these realities gently yet firmly, reminding us that while the legend is captivating, the literal truth may lie elsewhere, in smaller, more subtle traces, or perhaps in the currents of memory itself. And yet, the ocean does hold secrets, hidden cities and submerged ruins scattered across the globe. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument rises from the depths, its sharp terraces and steps sparking debate. Natural formation or man-made structure? In the waters near Bimini, the so-called Bimini Road stretches like a cryptic path beneath the sea, tantalizingly reminiscent of roads, walls, and causeways. Along the coasts of India, Greece, and the Mediterranean, other ruins occasionally surface, each a whisper from a past partially lost to time and tide. These smaller submerged sites are real, tangible remnants of human history, grounding the dream of Atlantis in the reality of lost cities that do exist, even if they do not match the scale of Plato's description. Archaeology, too, has its voice in this quiet conversation between myth and evidence. Excavations, careful measurements, and detailed study reveal the ingenuity of ancient peoples, from advanced engineering to maritime skill. Human civilizations have built structures that impress even the most modern minds. Walls and temples that survive millennia, ports and canals that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of water management, and artifacts hinting at trade and culture that span continents. Yet, none of these, so far, rise to the legendary proportions Plato envisioned. This tension between the grandeur of myth and the measured reality of archaeology is what keeps the story of Atlantis alive. It is not a failure of imagination or science, but a dialogue between what is remembered, imagined, and observed. In this space, Atlantis becomes something more than a landmass. It transforms into a symbol, a story woven from human experience and aspiration. It embodies the ideal civilization, advanced, wise, and harmonious, and the consequences of hubris, greed, and moral decay. Even without a literal city beneath the waves, the legend continues to teach, to inspire, and to provoke curiosity. Atlantis becomes a mirror, reflecting both our fears of loss and our desire for achievement, a civilization of memory that exists wherever imagination can wander. Imagine tonight floating over these submerged landscapes in your mind. Picture the deep blue waters, quiet and heavy with mystery, broken only by the jagged rise of a sunken structure. Perhaps it is a temple, a terrace, or a pathway partially obscured by sand and coral. Imagine the slow drift of currents, the gentle sway of seaweed, and the faint glimmer of light filtering from above. These are the places where myth and reality meet, where imagination whispers alongside science, where the story of Atlantis finds a gentle home in the mind, even if it cannot be measured in square kilometers. Even as science tempers our visions with reason, it also fuels them with wonder. Consider tectonic movements. Islands emerge and sink, coastlines change, and entire civilizations may have experienced floods and upheavals that inspired stories. The Earth is alive, reshaping itself in ways that human eyes can barely perceive in a single lifetime. Submerged cities and coastal ruins are reminders of this restless planet, markers of civilizations that adapted, endured, or vanished, leaving echoes in both stone and story. Atlantis, then, can be understood as a symbolic representation of these cycles, a city that rises in imagination even as it sinks in reality. And so, as you settle deeper into sleep, think of Atlantis not as a point on a map, but as a constellation of ideas scattered across oceans, deserts, and the human mind. It is a civilization of the imagination, informed by history, tempered by science, and enriched by myth. The story persists because it does more than recount the past. It asks questions, sparks curiosity, and invites reflection. What can we learn from the rise and fall of civilizations? How do we navigate our own ambitions, knowledge, and morality? In this sense, the legend of Atlantis serves as both caution and inspiration, guiding us softly through thought and dream. Tonight, as we draw the curtain on our long journey through the waters of time, imagination, and history, it is time to linger softly on the essence of Atlantis. Not the physical city, not the sunken empire, but the enduring story that has captured human hearts for over 2 millennia. In the quiet darkness, with the gentle rhythm of your own breathing as a companion, let us explore why this tale continues to float, undiminished, across centuries and oceans, shimmering in the minds of dreamers everywhere. The story of Atlantis endures because it speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit. It is more than a tale of a lost civilization. It is a reflection of ourselves. It embodies our fascination with power, our recognition of pride, and our awareness of the fragile line between greatness and downfall. The Atlanteans, as Plato envisioned them, begin as divine and virtuous, yet over time succumb to hubris, ambition, and greed. We see in their story echoes of every great empire, every remarkable human achievement, and every lesson learned too late. It is, in a sense, a mirror held up to humanity, a gentle reminder that even the grandest creations are vulnerable to the forces of human desire and error. And yet, alongside caution, Atlantis carries the dream of a perfect past. It invites us to imagine a world in which society achieved harmony, wisdom, and technological marvels beyond our understanding. In literature, art, film, and games, Atlantis is depicted as radiant cities of gleaming temples, canals reflecting soft sunlight, and streets lined with treasures beyond imagining. Even if the city never physically existed, the vision of it persists as a utopia, a tantalizing hint at what humanity might aspire to, if only we could balance ambition with morality, knowledge with wisdom. Imagine this city tonight, not as a distant myth, but as a shimmering vision drifting softly across the horizon of your mind. Part of the allure is the comfort of mystery. Atlantis reminds us that some questions do not require immediate answers. Some stories, no matter how much we study, map, or debate, are meant to remain partially veiled. Perhaps this is why the tale has endured. It leaves a gentle space for imagination to roam freely. There is comfort in knowing that not everything must be solved. but some wonders are better experienced as echoes, whispers, or glimpses in the mind's eye. In the quiet moments before sleep, this sense of mystery is a balm, allowing curiosity to drift gently alongside rest, inviting dreams filled with possibilities, not resolutions. Throughout our journey, we have seen Atlantis through countless lenses. As Plato described it, a golden city of orichalcum and concentric rings. As explorers speculated, it might be across oceans and islands, as spiritual mystics and visionaries imagined it, as writers, artists, and filmmakers brought it to life. In each interpretation, the city changes shape, yet its core remains, a symbol of human aspiration, of morality tested against desire, and of the allure of the unknown. The story does not demand belief in its literal truth. Instead, it offers a playground for the mind, a stage upon which dreams, lessons, and wonder can play out gently, safely, and endlessly. Consider tonight the layers of Atlantis one upon the other, like gentle waves lapping at the edge of consciousness. There is the historical whisper, faint but persistent, from Plato's Timaeus and Critias. There is the literary dreamscape alive in Renaissance poetry, Enlightenment essays, romantic novels, and modern fiction. There is the visual spectacle from classical paintings to cinematic wonders, comic books and video games. There is the spiritual vision, the mystical interpretation, the psychic exploration, and there is the scientific perspective, mapping the ocean floor, examining geology, and placing boundaries on possibility. In the quiet, these layers blend seamlessly, forming a tapestry of meaning, wonder, and contemplation, each thread soft against the mind as it prepares to drift toward sleep. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Atlantis is the way it bridges time. It connects us to ancient Greece, to Plato, speaking softly in a shaded courtyard. It touches medieval scholars, Renaissance philosophers, explorers, setting sail into unknown waters, and modern dreamers reading, imagining, and watching stories unfold. The city itself may be lost beneath waves or never have existed in the material sense, yet it persists across time, alive wherever imagination and wonder are nurtured. In this way, Atlantis is not merely a story of the past. It is a companion to the present and a gentle guide into the dreams of the future. As you lay here tonight, let your mind drift gently over these visions. Imagine walking along Atlantean streets, listening to water ripple through canals, and seeing the soft glow of orichalcum from temples and palaces. Picture explorers peering into the deep, scientists mapping the ocean floor, and artists capturing the city in brush and ink. Sense the rise and fall of the civilization, the moral lessons whispered in every shadowed corridor, and the beauty that remains even in loss. Let these images mingle with your own imagination, a gentle current guiding thoughts toward wonder and rest. Atlantis, in the end, is alive because it allows us to dream of something greater than ourselves while reminding us of our fragility. It is a story of balance between ambition and humility, knowledge and ethics, curiosity and respect for the unknown. It teaches that civilizations may rise, flourish, and fade, but the lessons, reflections, and imagination they inspire can endure indefinitely. Even in its absence, Atlantis provides presence, a quiet, luminous thread weaving through the tapestry of human culture, inviting us to consider what is possible, what is lost, and what is eternal in the human mind. And as your thoughts drift now toward the gentle embrace of sleep, consider this. Atlantis may not lie beneath ocean waves as Plato imagined. Its towers and canals may never have graced the earth in marble and orichalcum. Yet in a deeper sense it is not lost at all. It lives quietly in imagination, in stories told before bedtime, in art, in literature, in film, in games, and in the dreams of those willing to wander through possibility. Tonight, It becomes a gentle companion to your mind, a shimmering city beneath the waves of consciousness, guiding your thoughts into calm, quiet, and sleep. So, breathe slowly, let the currents of wonder and reflection carry you, and feel the timeless pulse of Atlantis softly beneath the surface of your thoughts. The city may be lost to history, but it is alive in every question asked, every story told, and every dream that drifts quietly in the night. Tonight, let Atlantis rest beside you as you rest, a symbol of mystery, wisdom, aspiration, and the gentle beauty of the unknown. And with that, as the waves of your imagination settle and the quiet hum of night surrounds you, allow yourself to drift completely, letting the legend of Atlantis, eternal, enigmatic, and endlessly inspiring, guide you softly into a world of dreams, calm, and peaceful sleep.